I can see Luis Njako is joining. You're welcome. And we are just beginning, so you're not late. So you may like to mute your microphone as we begin. We are beginning. We are beginning a series of series 2 of our PIRL webinar. And today we are looking at research in disability inclusive development. This is session 1, and session 1 is basically session 1 is basically on research foundations and themes. And so we are just going to be discussing very basic things that we are definitely familiar with or not. And we will be doing a lot of participatory work. So we will be asking you to contribute as we go ahead, and all of us will contribute to the success of this, our discussion. We definitely know that we are in different places. We also know that we have different expertise. There will be people joining, or there are people presently who are at the beginning of research, who are at the middle, who are already senior, and there are some other people who are experts. But what we want to underline today is that all our contributions are very, very important, and that everybody in the research team is very important. And that so you make your contributions without any fear, make your contributions knowing that they are valued. I take the case of, there was one time that we did research and we had our research assistant, and there was one research assistant that didn't do a very good job. So the whole process was blocked, and we had to come back to see how to collect the data that that research assistant was supposed to collect, just to say that everybody is very important. Even somebody in the research chain, everybody is very important. And we are considering that as well in this, our series of discussions. We know that all our contributions are very important. So feel free as you discuss, and know that we are taking note of our discussions, and that your input might just be the turning point, might just be what can keep us moving, might just be what will facilitate the process. So feel free. And now we would love to know each other, and so that we can discuss in a more friendly manner. We will just need that maybe you give your name, you give your affiliations, your organization, or any other group that you belong to, and maybe, just tell us a bit about your research experience, just a short description of what your research experience is. I think in that way, we will know each other. Maybe, Lynn, do you want to start?
Sure. Except, why don't you start, Luis?
Okay. Let me start, and every other person will join. So, Luis is Luis. You know, it's always difficult to talk about yourself, but everybody will learn to talk about ourselves, because it is very important. Luis is an independent researcher in disability inclusive development. I studied a lot of, in my educational life, I did a lot of teacher training, like teacher education, and then I continued and was trained as a secondary school teacher, and then I became interested in inclusive development and inclusive education in particular, and I've done a lot of research in that light on inclusive education, as well as other inclusive research domains. And then now I am the PIRL Project coordinator. I equally do a lot of consultancy for project evaluation, especially projects related to disability inclusive development. So in terms of research, I can say I am at an early career researcher, and that's how I can describe myself for now. I hope I was a bit. I hope I spoke about my name and affiliations and some experience in research. Any other person can take the floor. So
I'll be the traffic control.
okay, yeah.
So my name is Lynn Cockburn. At the moment, I'm in a place called Hamilton, Ontario, where I live. Much of my work has been affiliated with the University of Toronto, where I have been in the Department of Occupational Science and Occupational Therapy for several years. I'm also affiliated with the International Center for Disability and Rehabilitation, also at the University of Toronto. Over the years, I've done a fair amount of work in the Northwest region of Cameroon and a little bit of work in other parts of Cameroon as well. People often ask me, why do I go to that part of Cameroon? It's because I spent some time there with my family when I was a child, and so I know that area and just have some deep love for it, I guess. I started not wanting to do research and then deciding to do participatory research only. Over the years, I have strayed from doing only participatory research. I've done other kinds of research as well. But I think for me, it is just so important to emphasize working with communities. And I guess, you know, in this current climate, the importance of recognizing what kind of research we are doing and why we're doing it is just so crucial. So I was really excited when we were able to put together the team for the PIRL Project. Some of you are from PIRL, others are associated with the PIRL network, and others are just new to it. As time goes on, you'll hear more about the PIRL Project. Let's move to Sean Cleaver, please. If you're finished your lunch.
Well, I can sneak that in with, I believe, participating fully, which is good because it's a very great pleasure to be with you all today. As Lynn had mentioned, my name is Sean Cleaver. I'm speaking to you today from Montreal, or Montréal for any francophones here in Quebec and/or Canada. And Dr. Luis, I think that you did a fabulous introduction. I can encourage you with that. And I like how you described yourself as an early career researcher. I've been describing myself as an early career academic in the last little while to emphasize that research is part of the work that I do, but I also want to continue a lot of engagement in teaching activities and other service activities. So wearing that hat of academic seems to reflect it accurately. These past few years, I've been focused more on research. And since the start of 2020, I've actually been taking on increasing teaching responsibilities, and I'm happy with that. I hope to continue doing research as I take on these other roles. With respect to affiliations, I have many affiliations, but only one of them is employment-based these days, and that's at McGill University here in Montreal. And my official job is facilitating service learning for medical students. But additional roles that I have with the university include mentorship activities for students learning to do research, as well as helping student leaders who engage in global health. And with respect to my own research, I consider it to be at the intersection of global health, disability, and rehabilitation. Profession-wise, I'm a physiotherapist, so I guess we could declare that as a type of affiliation. But my main research activities have been in Southern Africa, in Zambia, collaborating with disabled persons organizations to find ways that they're able to overcome their challenges, live their goals, achieve their rights, those types of activities. That is all that I can think of to say at this time. Lynn, Luis, anyone else who thinks I might have missed some details, I'm open to filling those in, but otherwise I'm willing to pass it over.
Thank you, Sean. Anyone have a quick comment or question for Sean? Okay. We will move on to, let's go to Luis and Jacquoy. Luis, are you in a place where you can talk?
Yeah, I'm getting you now.
Wonderful, thank you.
Hey everyone, good evening. So my name is Luis Njakoy, and I live here in the northwest region of Cameroon. I thought I was going to say an early career until I heard Dr. Luis say he was there, so probably my affiliation is not on that list. So I just graduated from school and I'm still very new to disability studies. And here I work with SUVI, which stands for Hope Social Union for the Visually Impaired. And it's a great honor for me to be amongst you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Luis. We'll go to Dr. Komita Sunny.
Hi, good evening, everybody. I'm Dr. Kometa. I work at the University of Bamenda. I am a teacher, and I've been doing a lot of research. And I'm part of the PIRL Project. Basically, that is what I can say for now.
Could you say a little bit about the kinds of research that you've been involved in?
Research on water accessibility to the communities around where I live. Climate-related research on agriculture, on access to other basic facilities that we might need. And I also do research on integrated water resource management.
Thank you very much. I'm seeing a few people who do not have microphones connected. So if you don't have a microphone that you can connect, please do introduce yourself in the chat space if that's possible for you. We'll move now to Kofi. Welcome, Kofi.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kofi Kwapumesa. I'm living here at Richardson in Dallas County in Texas, United States. I grew up in Togo, which is I'm originally from. As a person with disability myself, having a polio when I was even before 1 year old, I know the struggle that people with disability facing in what we call third world country. Coming to America and see the difference in terms of accommodation, inclusive education, I decided to go back to school and complete my Master of Education. Now I'm a doctorate student in Southern Methodist University, where I'm thinking of working on inclusive education for people with disability. I will choose 2 or 3 countries from the West Africa that I need to compare the chance and the discrepancy. I would be remiss not to say that when I was in Togo, I was a music teacher for the blind. So in addition to my own experience as a disabled, I can see how those visual impaired are struggling in terms of accommodation, accessibility. That's prompted me to not stay here and enjoy the goodness of America, but I'm ready to go back and give back to my community. I haven't done any research so far, so I'm here to learn and grow like I said. Thank you.
Thank you, Kofi. That's very, very interesting. And I'm hoping that we will have one of these sessions about music and research on music. It was an area that I spent some time looking at over the last few years, using African drumming as part of different approaches. Whoops. Alice, do you have a microphone you can use to introduce yourself? Or Sylvanus? Both of you are showing that you don't have microphones connected. I don't know if you are able to connect and introduce yourself. We would love to hear from you, or if not, is there anyone that I missed asking for the introduction? I think we've got everybody. There were a couple of other people who seem to have dropped from the call. So back to you, Luis, Dr. Mbibeh.
Thank you for the introduction. Kofi, I love your introduction, and your name is like the name of a musician, so I wonder whether that pushed you to love music too. We will be grateful to continue to hear from you. There are three main points that we want to focus on today. We'll be looking at what research is all about. We will try to okay, I can see Alice introducing herself, so we'll come back to that later. Alice says she is hello everyone, my name is Alice. I'm a PhD candidate in Cameroon. Okay, thank you very much, Alice. I hope you're getting us, and we'll continue. Maybe you will continue to tell us what kind of research you are doing, and we will come back to you. We'll come back to the team later. So we'll focus today on looking at what is research. In general, we know this is a question that is all of us will be able to say what we think research is all about, given our different impressions about what we think research is. We will also be looking at the situation of limited research in low and medium income countries. And we are trying to look at the fact that research is going on, but there is limited attention that has been given, especially to people with disabilities. And this means also that we will have to think very carefully about why we want to do research and what we choose to do, and even looking at the method of how we want to do it. We'll also be looking at the importance of teamwork, importance of working together as a group, and working together in research teams, and which requires, just as Lynn was already indicating, a lot of collaboration, requires additional ways of doing things, and so on. So those are the three key things that we will be discussing today. And let me begin with the first key point, which is what research is all about. And I would love to ask that anybody should share with us his impression about what you think research is. Is there anybody available to share with us? You can always raise your hand and we will get to you. What do we think research is? Or it's a very difficult question to ask at the moment, because so many things will come to your mind. You will know different things about research, and you are like, where should I begin? Thank you, Sean Cleaver. Maybe you will you will start and others can follow. What do we think research is?
I will try. I think that people will find that my answer might be incomplete, so others are welcome to build upon this. But what I would say that research is a systematic way to answer important questions.
Okay, great. Great. He has underscored the importance of systematic way of doing things, systematic way of looking for information. Yes, another person. Is there any other person?
Can I just comment on what you mean by systematic? When
Yes.
systems, I think of ways of doing things, and it's like having an agreed on, I guess. Is that kind of what you meant, Sean?
Mostly. It's interesting. I did my best to try to provide a short answer. I was thinking, like, how can I reduce it to as few words as possible? But even with that, some of those words then become very, very important. So I would say that the research system of answering questions is oriented towards attention to details. And the way that that attention can be developed between teams of researchers, the approaches that they use, the philosophy that they base the research upon, I can see a lot of variety within it. But I think there's something about that attention to detail and following a process that separates research from other ways of answering questions.
Yeah, following the process is really interesting. That's a helpful way of maybe thinking about it. You also mentioned, I think you said, addressing important questions.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I added the word important. I was wondering if anyone would ask me about that. Yeah. I did that on the fly, and I thought, you know, like if we devote all this energy to conduct a research, then there has to be a good motivation to do it. So that's why I threw in the adjective important in that understanding.
I would tend to agree with you, but I'm not sure that everybody would always agree that the questions are important.
Oh, good point. Good. Yeah, I didn't think of it that way. Yeah, now I'm getting you.
What do others think?
So the question of important question, it takes us to who decides even what is important, what is the process, and how there are always different interventions and different processes, different forces that come into play when we want to decide what is important for now, what should we do, what method should we use, and so on. Forces. So it brings me back to critical analysis and looking at critical theoretical perspective of you could have maybe issues around power and privilege, issues around gender and experiences, even opportunities. So different kinds of perspectives that we want that come into play. But one of the things that I understood from Sean's one key issue is about following a process and about research being systematic. I was giving an example to somebody or to one very young student who asked me, what really is research? And it baffled me, and I said, okay, today when I get up, maybe try to make a difference between searching and research. I got up and I was looking for my socks to wear, and I just scattered everywhere and I picked them. But research there are certain decisions that have to be made before a research project, before we carry out research. Such decisions are informed decisions, in which case we have to follow a particular process and we have to answer certain questions before we go. So generally, I think that depending on the different perspectives from where we are coming from, maybe a science-based perspective, art-based perspective. We could have ways of doing research, but the central point to me is that it must follow a process. People must be able to identify that this is the kind of research you are doing and that this is the process you have used, so that some other person coming to do the same thing will equally find maybe similar results to what you have used using the process you have used. So we will have to, in a research process, answer questions like, what am I even, answer some of these WH questions that we know. What am I even researching about? How do you come to decide? It's also another question on what you're researching on. Why are you carrying out research on? There needs to be some evidence as to why you are carrying out research on that topic. And then you will, of course, have to choose where and when you want to do the research, and most importantly, the how, the process, which takes you back to the methods and to the theoretical frames and so on that you want to use. So it is that will, of course. So research has to, you need certain key decisions to take at the beginning before you will be able to carry out research. So there are just so many things that we can talk about. And I think if there is some other thing that we have not mentioned, because we are simply mentioning, and is there somebody to mention any other thing about research? If not, we'll continue.
I would love for someone to explain quantitative, qualitative, and mixed methods approaches. Or is that clear to everyone? Is there anyone who would like us to spend a few minutes on that? The difference between qualitative and quantitative? Well, maybe we can come back to it then.
Okay. Okay, so we'll come back to quantitative and qualitative discussions as we go. Welcome, Helen, and I can see that Alice has a microphone, which is good. So we just started, so we are going on. So Lynn is going to come in at this point to tell us about evidence in research.
So I think for me, any discussion about research has to address this question of evidence, and particularly when I think about research having to do with health, with disability, with rehabilitation, the complexity of rehabilitation and what that could mean, of inclusion, social inclusion, exclusion. We really need to unpack and think about evidence and how do we know what we know and where does the evidence come from. So I'm going to go through a few slides, and because we are a small group, of course, feel free to ask a question at any point. And then after I go through these slides about evidence, we'll open it up for some discussion again. So someone sent me this video about why evidence is so important and the levels of evidence. This was someone in the PIRL network, and they were proposing that we use these levels of evidence as our foundation for our research. So if you haven't heard of the levels of evidence, this is an approach to understanding knowledge, I guess, that was developed by Dr. Sackett and his colleagues back in 1996. And many of you will have seen this kind of pyramid. And I'm just going to go through it quickly in case people don't have access to oops, somebody's drawing on the screen. I'm not sure if that's me or that's someone else. The first level at the base of the pyramid are case reports and expert opinions that include literature reviews, narratives of situations, consensus statements that experts might put together. So this is evidence about what is happening, but is also seen as the lowest level of evidence. The next level is descriptive studies that include some, as we were saying a few minutes ago, some systematic way of addressing important questions. But it might be one person using a single subject design. It might be a case series. It might be another kind of study that doesn't have what would be considered strong statistical power, strong statistical analysis. The next level is still having one group of participants, one group of subjects, and not randomized. If randomization is a word that you're not familiar with, we can talk a little bit about that. So these are studies where you might have some data collected before and after an intervention is provided to a group of people. They might be, the formal test in some way before the intervention. And the thought is that if there's a before and after process, that evidence gained is going to be better than if it's just an after process, as would be in level 4. So level 4 might be a study where people are given some kind of intervention, they participate in something, and then the outcomes are measured. Level 3 would be there's a measurement done at the beginning, then they're given an intervention, and then the outcomes or whatever is being measured is measured again. Level 2 studies are where there's at least 2 groups, again, non-randomized, but more control in terms of what happens to those groups or how the analysis is done. If we think about people with disabilities, for example, it might be that you have a group of people living in the community and you just look at 2 different ways of sorting them into groups and what the outcomes were. So it might be you follow them over time and you compare the 2 groups. A randomized group is considered the best kind of study, level 1 study, where the groups of people are put into 2 different categories and they're randomly sorted into those 2 groups, and then the intervention is provided and the measurement is taken at the end. So the thought is that if you have people randomly put into groups and one group gets the intervention and the other group does not get the intervention, you do measurements before and after, you have a better sense of what has happened and that it's due to that particular intervention. Level 1 studies are also systematic reviews and studies, what's called a meta-analysis, where several randomized controlled trial studies are looked at together to see what the impact is. So I have some concerns about this kind of evidence hierarchy, especially when we think about low-income countries, and especially when we think about disability inclusive development and all the issues related to that short form. We're using this short form, disability inclusive development, but we know that it means many, many, many things depending on what we're talking about. how would it be possible to really put people with disabilities into randomly assign them to groups and control their lives to measure the interventions in a way that would be recognized by this kind of RCT trial study. It's not like giving a medication where you can say this group gets 5 milligrams and the other group gets 15 milligrams, and let's see what the impact is. I think the issues that we're talking about when we talk about disability inclusive development are much more complex than giving a medication. And so we have some concerns about randomized controlled trial studies being at the apex of, you know, the best kind of research. Now, we can have some discussion about this. We also know that in low-income countries, it is extremely challenging to put together randomized controlled trials. Is it really the best use of the limited resources? And maybe in many of the places that we're working, there are ways of documenting stories very systematically with the people who are living in the communities, that maybe using well-documented stories can actually influence practice and influence change in a much more profound way than the carrying out a randomized controlled trial. So that's just a very quick overview as we think about levels of evidence. And I will share the video with you if you haven't seen, or if you haven't had a chance to really consider levels of evidence. I think we're, in our discussions in the PIRL network and the related projects that most of the people who are here are interested in, it's this intersection of research and disability, broadly speaking, and development, and again, broadly speaking. We often talk about community-based research or participatory research. There are different terms for it. But some of the key points around participatory research have to do with the idea that people should be involved in the research process, that they should not be researched on, they should be involved in the process from the beginning to the end. The reality is it's very challenging, it's very difficult to do participatory research, but it can still be a good goal. So we come back to what is it that we are trying to do and why is it important? And I'm just going to say a word about the PIRL Research Project, which we are just about to begin. Those of you who have been following along with the PIRL Project know that over the last year we've been trying to get our project underway. We had to get an ethical approval. Our discussion next week will be about ethics. We now have our ethics approval, and so we are going to be starting our research project. One of the things that we decided to do was to focus on ourselves, thinking that we had enough people in our networks. We are doing a survey about the use of technology and the experiences that we've had in disability inclusive development through doing a survey and doing interviews. So we will have both qualitative information, textual information stories, the qualitative piece, and we will also have some numerical information, the quantitative piece. So it is a mixed methods study. And we're excited to be getting going on it, and all of you will be hearing more about that very soon. So let me take a pause there and have some reactions to discussions about evidence and the creation of evidence and knowledge. If you want to put the little blue hand up to indicate you'd like to say something, that would be great, or you can just unmute yourself. We're a small enough group. Sean.
Yes, Lynn, I want to thank you for doing such a good job to present Sackett's levels of evidence and then to demonstrate some major weaknesses of it. I was thinking when we were talking, when I was doing my introduction about my research work and who I am as a researcher, that I would talk about my evolution. I decided not to because I felt I was talking too much already, but I think it's useful at this point. And that is because as a researcher, I was brought up in the culture of believing Sackett's levels of evidence, and then I was provided an alternative to it when I did my doctorate at University of Toronto, where you are, Lynn. And I would just like to flag that there can be some ways in which those levels of evidence can be useful. There are some major limitations to them. You identified a few. There's some ways that they can be harmful. And for people who become involved in research, especially if you're involved in the health sciences, medicine, etc., they're a little difficult to avoid. So there might be instances where people might see their limitations and they might embrace Sackett's levels of evidence as a way for their work to be accepted. And for people who feel like they're in that position, I just would want to give them permission to do that, because sometimes to be able to speak with our colleagues, we have to be able to enter into their culture and use their language and whatnot. But for people who see the downsides, hello there.
Hi, Sean. I'm not interrupting, but what you're explaining is very important. I would love you to go a little bit slowly so that we can grasp what you are saying. Thank you.
No problem, and thank you for that interruption. I'll continue where I was, and if you would like me to return on anything, I'm available to do so. So what I wanted to say, in addition to people who might use Sackett's levels of evidence for reasons of acceptance, there could be people who avoid Sackett's levels of evidence because they think that they're harmful. And sometimes that requires an entire strategy, because it can sometimes be difficult to figure out, if we don't do that, then how do we do good research that's different? Sometimes it means confronting the people who are very invested with those Sackett's levels of evidence. So I would just want to add to Lynn's points to say that if people have strong feelings either for them or against them, to encourage everyone to be welcome, to feel welcome, to identify what those feelings are. And I think that there is something that we could work together as a group to identify the ways forward that work for everyone.
Thank you, Sean. That's really important to remember. And in a couple minutes, we're going to move into talking a little bit more about teams and language and the culture of research. And I think you've given a really nice indication of how complex and how aware we have to be in doing this kind of work. Any other comments about evidence? And it could be about what I said, or it could be about any other aspect of knowing, knowledge, things that you're thinking about. Also, I don't know how to get rid of the red line. So if anybody knows how to get rid of it, please let me know. Okay, so our second sort of main point was, we have really come to the perspective of, it's very important for us to think about what kinds of research we want to do and why. And as we go forward with these discussions, we will be thinking about what are the good principles that we're trying to follow, that we're trying to use, what are the ways that we want to practice. how do we think deeply about including people with disabilities in research, knowing that for many people they have been significantly excluded right from the beginning, excluded from education in primary school, excluded from social activities. Oh, Alice, I see you've made a comment that the example about level of research is just for quantitative studies. Not actually. The qualitative, I mean, it depends on which, at least in my experience, it depends on sort of the location of the researchers, and it is starting to change, but in that, in those levels of evidence, qualitative research tends to be seen as the very bottom, as very low-level evidence, that it is often seen as being preparation for better kinds of research. I'm being a little bit harsh because we don't have a lot of time to talk about it. And again, I hope that as we go forward, we'll talk a little bit more about you know, different approaches to research. We are hoping that each of us will share examples of research approaches, research projects that you've done, and why you've made the decisions that you've made. So we will be having a number of sessions like this. So there's no easy or simple answers to these questions. But we wanted to take a couple of minutes, and I think we still have a couple of minutes, to think about what are some of the good principles or practices that you have seen in doing research in disability inclusive development. So because we are a small group, I'm just going to give everyone a chance to say one thing, knowing that there are probably many, but what's the first thing that comes to mind when you think about a good practice or a good principle in doing this kind of research? And we'll start with Dr. Komita. Dr. Komita, can you share one principle or practice that you try to keep in mind? Thank you.
About research?
About doing research in Africa with people with disabilities specifically.
You have to be honest about your results. You have to be, you have to make it as simple as possible for people to understand what you're doing.
So thinking about ways of sharing the information so that it really reaches people.
Yeah.
Great, good point. Alice? Can you unmute yourself? Okay, maybe your microphone is not working, so maybe you could type something in the chat. Kofi?
Yeah, I'm thinking about problem solving.
Can you be a little bit more specific? What would be the good practice or the good principle?
Yeah, it's like you have to have
okay.
Is somebody talking?
I think Alice is trying to talk. So maybe, Kofi, if you could just hold on for 1 second and we'll hear from Alice. Thank you. Alice, go ahead.
Yes.
Alice, what is one good practice that you try to use in your research?
I don't know if understanding.
Okay, I think
Yeah.
the line is not very good. We're not hearing you. Perhaps you could put it in the chat. That way we'll get it very clearly. Thank you. So back to you, Kofi.
Yes.
Oops.
Yeah, she's trying to say something, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we lost her. So Kofi, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to say the objective will need to be able to answer a question like we say by providing a solution to a specific problem. What do you want to achieve? What will be your contribution to the society? So you have to think of problem solving, trying to impact the society. That's I don't know if
Yeah.
that's a good answer. Yeah.
So making it applicable to real life, not
Yes.
something that remains in an academic setting.
Yeah.
Luis and Jacoy? Are you there? Do you have one good principle or practice that you would like to share? Okay, maybe his line is also not so good. Sylvanus, you have joined us. I'm not sure how much you have been able to catch of the discussion. Do you have a good principle or a good practice you would like to share?
I'm not very sure if this has to do with ethics, but when looking at issues around disability, definitely we will be taking into consideration issues around, respecting the autonomy of those involved in the research, particularly sample groups. And since the focus is primarily on development, as Dr. Kofi said, any research should be one that has some direct relevance to the lives of persons with disabilities, rather than pushing, just an academic exercise. So it should be highly focused one. But as I said earlier, the issue of respecting the autonomy of the participants in such a research, excluding, trying to avoid patronizing attitudes. So we go into the research to learn about the experiences and realities of these persons, and not to impose our ideas.
Very
I'm not sure if I'm clear on that.
Yes, yeah, it's very important. So again, to use the PIRL project example, when we were developing this project, we tried to emphasize on partnerships as one of the key principles. It does make a more challenging study because there are many people involved and it takes time. We also wanted to focus on what's happening in the global south, and particularly in Cameroon, although we have expanded beyond Cameroon. But it's not without tensions and challenges. And so I'm aware of time, so I'm not going to say too much more about that, but we've heard a number of good ideas about how to do this work and things to keep in mind.
Hello, Alice Noel who has left the meeting.
Back to you, Luis, to wrap up about teamwork, I think. Luis Mbibeh?
Yes, thank you for all the contributions. And one of the key things is about teamwork. And since we are running out of time, we will say that it is very important and that to work as a team, there are so many considerations that we have there are so many considerations, like what is the language of research? It may be different depending on the context and the kind of research that we are doing. So we need to also understand the way the research enterprise in the whole world, how does it work? Where is funding from? What is really important in our society, as well as in the global world? And this requires a lot of collaboration, requires a lot of new ways of doing things. And we will need, in terms of teamwork, we will need to support each other and work together just as much as possible. There are people who need just little support in order to work. And when we do disability inclusive development work, research, working as a team, we'll need to consider just all of this as we go. So that is the kind of thing we have been doing in the PIRL project, trying to work as a team, trying to support each other, trying to understand the context of the different regions. What is the context of Cameroon, for instance? What is the context of other partners? What is the context of Canada, for instance? And how do we work together? There are usually little challenges, but we try to see how to move on with those challenges. I think generally that is what teamwork is all about. And so we can, from what we have done today, there are some words that we may want to remember as we close. We are already a minute into our time. We could think about, we have seen what research is, we have seen how ways of knowing evidence and the different levels of evidence. We didn't talk about we spoke a bit about qualitative or quantitative research, as well as mixed method research, and we will obviously love to come back to this in our other webinars. And we also underlined participatory and community-based research, which we very much use within the context of the PIRL project. There are, of course, in the research, rules as principal investigators, co-investigators, and collaborators, as well as community members. But the central point here is that all these people have their roles are very important. We do not minimize any role in terms of research as we work together. So we are very thankful to you for participating in this webinar today, for taking off your time. We want to thank you, Luis Njakoi. We want to thank you, Sean Kiva. We want to thank you, Silvanus. We want to thank you, Tony and Kofi. All of you did very important and great inputs. We want to thank you, Alice. And there was Helen D, who joined and went back. Sorry for that. We are hoping that you will join us again in the next series. Our next series will be on ethical issues in research, and we are hoping that you will join us as we continue to discuss and to learn from each other. If you have not done any training on ethics before, this might be helpful. We will be sending you some documents prior to the session. Maybe you can go through. Thank you so much, and have a nice evening in Cameroon, and have a nice rest of the day in Canada, and in Kofi, where are you? And in Dallas, Texas.
Thank you, Luis.
Thank you.
one of the things that is really important in the PIRL project is the networking and getting to know other people who are doing work that is similar and different to our own work, so that we can continue to develop our own work. So Luis, thank you for giving us the opportunity to get to know each other a little bit today, and we can look forward to continuing on. Bye for now, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.